We've all heard of EQ, but what about IQ? How do the two compare, and which one is more important? So let's start with the more familiar term, IQ, otherwise known as intelligence quotient. It's characterized by traits such as focus, concentration, comprehension, memory, analytical skills. And I was doing some reading on the original IQ And I was doing some reading on the original IQ test, and essentially what they did was that they would take your mental age and divide it by your actual age and multiply that by 100. So say you are 10 years old and you have a mental age of 15, your IQ would be 150. EQ, on the other hand, is your emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. The two are kind of used interchangeably here. And this really deals with your ability to perceive, understand, and express emotions. So while IQ is a very individual thing, it only deals with the intelligent level of yourself, EQ applies to something both to yourself and the people around you. People with EQ are typically characterized by having self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivation, social skills, and leadership skills. And I tried to do some tests that I could find online, free ones, on EQ, but I wasn't very successful in finding one that I thought was legit. I also feel like it's kind of hard to objectively measure EQ in a test that you take yourself. I think it's harder to really measure EQ based on a survey or a form of questions, because oftentimes when we're answering these questions, we will answer, in the form of the ideal self rather than the real self. We'll answer based off what we would like ourselves, what we would think ourselves to do, like the best case scenario. Whereas for IQ, if we're answering questions, it's yes or no, it's black or white, you either know it or you don't. But if I'm wrong, let me know. If there's a free EQ test out there, I would love to know, I would love to take it. Let me know in the comments down below. So if you look at IQ and EQ, I kind of think of it as book smart versus street smart. And while I was trying to think of maybe a very common known analogy to this, the first thing that popped in my mind was Ed, Edd, and Eddy. Double D is represented with IQ, he's the smart one. We could say Eddie is representing EQ because he somewhat assumes the leadership role, though I think maybe if my memory is serving me well, I think he could have related better to his fellow Eds. And Ed with just the one D, well, bless his heart and his butter toast. So when it comes to which one is more important, that's something that I can't really comfortably give a definitive answer to. But I think we can look for clues depending on what situation you're in. Say you are in school and you're studying for a test, or maybe it's crunch time on a deliverable at work. I think this is where IQ really comes in handy, where the concentration and the focus skills and the analytical skills and memory will really serve you well here. But I think in those same scenarios, just slightly tweaked, I think EQ would also be beneficial. So say for school, you're working on a group project and you're having to collaborate and divvy out the different portions of the project. Or with the work example, if you're working on a deliverable and you really have to come together to collaborate on getting this done and out the door, those people skills, oh my God, those people skills are really, really going to be needed in those situations. So if you were to do a quick internet search, there are a lot of statistics floating out there. You just search for EQ versus IQ. And I've found that the general number that's floating around is that IQ is responsible for 20% of your success, while the rest, 80%, is attributed to other things, such as EQ. Now, while you might be looking at the statistic and thinking, okay, well, that implies that EQ is better, and based off this channel name, you might think that I would think that too, but I wouldn't necessarily say that is the case. I think they're both critical components to success, and it really just depends on what success looks like for you. They both play their part. let's look at like a home example, a family example. Really common scenarios where in a couple, a parenting couple, one person will be the primary breadwinner while the other person will be the primary caregiver. And we'll use those same statistics in this example. So say one person brings home 80% of the income and does 20% of the caretaking, and then the opposite is said for the other parent. They do numbers. They do 80% of the caretaking and bring in 20% of the income. Now, could you really answer which parent is most important in raising this family and building this home? I wouldn't comfortably be able to answer that question, and I think really what it comes down to is they both play their part. Sure, they can be more important in certain aspects, such as bringing home the money or taking care of the kids, but they're both critical to the success that is raising the family and building the home. So I think that same logic really applies to EQ and IQ. I think throughout life, as we're transitioning and going through different stages, and maybe like just even working on a specific task that's in front of us, one might be more necessary or more applicable than the other, but it doesn't mean that one is more important than the other. They both play their role, and they're both integral in a successful and a happy life, in my opinion. We could have all the knowledge in the world and be super smart, but if we're not relating to people and if we don't have this circle, the supportive circle around us, that sounds just like a very lonely life. You could have all this knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's just going to be you and your thoughts. And I think the opposite can be said for EQ. You know, you could be very personable and have this amazing circle of people in your life, but if you're not paying mind or exercising your IQ by learning new things, you know, practicing your memory, your analytical skills, your focus, if you're not reading, if you're not basically trying to improve your knowledge set, I think that would be a critical aspect that would be missing in your life. I think you could be very fulfilled externally, but not internally in that respect. So in sum, I personally believe that EQ and IQ are both important, that they both play their roles in certain aspects of your life, and 80-20 percentage, sure, maybe there is research out there that supports this claim, but in the end, I personally think that they both play their role and they're both important. So, what do you think? Do you think one is better than the other? Do you think one is more important than the other? I think that you probably do. Alrighty, so hope you found this helpful. Hit that like, hit the subscribe with the bell if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. That's not a song. All right, I need to end this. Okay, bye now.